Okay, welcome everybody to today's show. My name is Pete Jones and I am Good in the Head. Welcome to the Good in the Head podcast. Today I have a really fun guest. Her name is Victoria Cramer. And ironically, I met her because my wife wanted a bed frame and they just happened to be selling one. And it was maybe a mile and a half, 2 miles away from where we live. So we went and checked it out. We loved it and we were able to get it downstairs, hopefully without ruining your home. And then she started to talk to me about her life journey a little bit. And it's a really interesting one. I can't wait for her to share it with you all today. Um, Victoria is an author of three books. I did run out and get this one. It's called Living Life Loudly. This is the first
Aw.
one. You were kind enough to sign a couple of the ones you did have and give them to us. And the other one was Live Loudly, a guided journal for curating your most epic life. And that is that. And then your most recent book, Do Epic Shit, The Power of Showing Up. Love the
They're
book.
actually reversed. So the
Oh,
last
my
one you
bad.
read is the most recent one. That one I launched in October, and the Do Epic Shit one I launched 3 years ago.
That's why. Okay, it made sense because I read this one on our trip to Reno and Lake Tahoe, and I was blown away. So,
Oh,
um, I've got a quote that I love. It says, "One day you will tell your story of how you overcame what you went through, and it will become someone else's survival guide."
that's right.
And let's get down to it. Would you share with everyone your story? Can't wait.
Oh my goodness. Well, I'm just a normal girl trying to survive in a lovely world that has lots of speed bumps, right? Um, about 10 years ago, we got blessed with the news that we were expecting. And my husband and I were thinking, one and done. This sounds like a really fun journey. And we got blessed with the news that we were having twins. Now, at the moment, it didn't feel as much like a blessing. It felt very overwhelming. But at the same time, we knew we were wired to handle hard stuff. So we embraced that. And then 3 months later, we started trying to figure out what was wrong with me. And 6 months later, so they were only 6 months old, we were gut punched. The twins part was a gut punch, but then this was like a super duper gut punch, the kind where you need to pull out a paper bag because you're hyperventilating and you've got to breathe in it. I hadn't done that since I was a kid. And fortunately, my husband had just eaten some fast food. So I pulled this paper bag out from underneath his seat of his truck and I'm breathing it in and out. But I'm hearing this news. You have the most aggressive form of breast cancer that there is. And knowing that our girls were only 6 months old and I was only 41, I started wondering if I was going to see their first birthday. And that is really where the journey started to begin. Now, if you were one of the unlucky souls that wished me a happy New Year's that year, which was 2014, um, knowing that on January 2nd, I was starting really hard chemo, I think I flipped you the bird and I was really not grateful or kind. I was a little bit bitter and I was a grumpy elf. I didn't want, I was like, F you, you do chemo if you think next year's going to be a good year because I don't want to be doing this. But honestly, it was such a gift. And I didn't realize it was a gift for a number of years. But I've been fighting now for 10 years. I obviously got to see my girl's first birthday, which is cool. I've seen their 10th birthday, and knock on wood, they'll turn 11 in January. And I hope to see many more. But the first battle I saw as a check the boxes, get this behind me. This is not going to be what writes my story in life. This is going to be a tiny little speed bump in the whole scheme of things. And I'll probably write a book about it because I want to help other people. And I've been given the gift of having worked in the corporate world for so many years that I have the tools to successfully navigate those it was 3 years, first 3 years of cancer treatment. And I thought it was going to be just kind of a put this in my rearview mirror and don't think about it again kind of thing. But it didn't turn out to be that. And I think it's because I was so freaking stubborn. I didn't learn enough lessons the first time around. So the second time around, hey, you're an anomaly. It came back. And it's not supposed to come back. And it's very weird, but there was some breast tissue left behind. Medicine's not perfect. And they're practicing medicine for a reason. Every single one of those doctors is practicing medicine for the rest of your lives. So you have to keep that in mind when mistakes occur, and they occur often. So some breast tissue was left behind, and it grew back. So I started battle number two. And that's when I started to realize that I was a bit of an anomaly in terms of my mindset. And so that's where the birthing of book number two, Do Epic Shit, The Power of Showing Up, started to occur to me because what I heard over and over again was, you're a warrior. You're a warrior. I didn't feel like a warrior. I felt like just any other human trying to survive. However, I have learned so much about my personality and my personality type, and how I'm predispositioned is to run away from pain, run away from the hard stuff. And gluttony, embracing only the good stuff, all of that is a part of me. I study something called the Enneagram, and if you're familiar with it at all, I'm this type 7, this enthusiast, and there's good and bad to that. And so I started to recognize that the drawback to my personality is that I'm a flight risk when it comes to showing up. Like, I would rather go out on an 8-hour mountain bike ride than go do an 8-hour round of chemo. Um, so I'd have on speed dial, I'm like, ready, Uber, take me home. I mean, nobody will even know if I don't go, right? And I told my doctor that, and I said, hey, I'm starting to recognize that I'm a flight risk. And this was in the first battle. I need you to help me not flee. I need to show up because I need to be here for the long haul. And she said, okay, we're going to do a few things to mitigate that and help you to be able to show up. So what I learned is that 60% of people don't show up for the hard stuff when it comes to fighting cancer. And that's really why I wrote Do Epic Shit, The Power of Showing Up, is because in battle number two, I showed up every day for 6 weeks or I think it was 7 weeks for radiation. That's not easy to go every day knowing you're going to feel sick and tired. And then I showed up for every round of the hard chemo again, even though I swore I would never do that again. And you do when you start to learn the keys to the right mental attitude. And so that's why I wrote Do Epic Shit, The Power of Showing Up. It's the difference. And I realized I am one of these few folks that has the ability to show up because I've put in place the right mechanisms to make sure that that happens. And the doctors had said to me, there's a reason why you're still here. You shouldn't be. Nobody gets another chance. And then battle number three, they were like, we don't know how you're still here. You should not be here theoretically. Um, but because you've got the right mental attitude, you're doing the right things physically, and you're doing the right things from a nutrition standpoint, there's a lot of that that's all tied together that's causing you to still be here. So the third battle, I'm grateful for COVID. I might be one of the few that is, but I'm grateful for COVID because I got COVID and I went to an urgent care and they took an x-ray of my lungs. And instead of saying, hey, looks like you do have COVID, they said, do you have an oncologist? Those are not words you want to hear, right?
Wow.
I was like, oh shit, not again. Pardon my French. But anyway, so it turned out, yep, as soon as I got finished fighting COVID, they did a PET scan and I look like Swiss cheese. I've got stage 4 breast cancer. I live with it. And 3 years ago, I started battling very epically hard, with no notice, really. We got the word, it's all throughout your bones. And by the way, your femur's about to break. We need to do another COVID test on you, but then we need to get you into surgery to immediately place a rod in your femur and your hip to keep both from breaking. You're going to have a very long recovery. It's like you've just had a hip replacement surgery. And then, as soon as you're finished with that, we need to start you on radiation and chemo again. And now it's you're on chemo the rest of your life. And I used to think now it's chemo light now because we're trying to not run a sprint, but rather a marathon. And so I do it every 3 weeks, and I will for the rest of my life, and a lot of other treatments too. But theoretically, I could be here another decade. You just never know. Nobody's putting a time limit on it because, again, we don't have any case studies that are similar to mine. But I'm so far tracking and doing the right things. And now my next PET scan's next week, and I think it's going to be fantastic. I hope it is. But I think it's going to be fantastic. But every time I have one of those, every 3 or 4 months, you just kind of pause, stop breathing for a minute, and go, am I good? So, anyways, so there's my story. I don't know if that helps, but tell me what else I can fill in.
Thank you for sharing the story. And it really is amazing, and it goes into detail in your books. And you share in the books the tools, the mindsets, the beliefs, the people, the community that has rallied around you, all the different things that has empowered you to navigate this so successfully. And you're an anomaly. You're an amazing human for sure. And I think an ambassador of hope for others who are just finding out that maybe they're coming into an adventure like you've been through. And I wanted to have you on the show specifically because of that, because, there are a lot of like more than usual cancer diagnoses coming up. And
Right.
I think the most important question at this point would be to ask, what would you recommend to people who are just finding out?
Yeah. That's when you don't know what you don't know, and it's overwhelming. I always say the hardest space to be in is from when you find out to when you have a strategy. If you have a strategy, anyone is unstoppable on a strategy, but it's that in between space that is quite bloody awful because you don't know how bad it is and you don't know what the solutions are. And you don't even know how many ists you need in your life, from oncologists to radiologist to a cardiologist. You need so many of them, and you don't know who these ists are or what they're going to do for you. So I think my advice would be there's a cool, especially if they're in Arizona, there's a cool organization. Well, you don't even have to be in Arizona. What am I talking about? They'll ship it to you, but there's a cool organization that I'm grateful for because they were the very first thing that was handed to me, and I wasn't prepared for how much knowledge I would gain, but it's called Bagit. Bagit, and it's Bagot cancer. And it doesn't matter what kind of cancer you're diagnosed with. Every doctor in Arizona should be handing out their Bagot bag, if you will. But it's like it's full of now more digitized. At the time for me, it was a binder, but now it's more digitized solutions that teach you what are the questions you need to be asking? What kinds of doctors do you need to meet with? It allows you to keep track of all of it and then also to keep track of the different kinds of medications and support that you're going to need throughout the journey. So, for instance, what was in there that was super helpful is if you were a young uh, cancer fighter, you're going to need to think about the fact that you can't hold your children after a double mastectomy for 6 weeks. 6 month olds, I can't hold them for 6 weeks. That is overwhelming, right?
Mm.
So it talks through and shares with you some of the things that you've got to think about that you might not have thought about because you've never had to do this before. And then I would, if I had it to do over again, I didn't know or recognize that having a naturopathic doctor was going to be more than kind of witchcraft, if you will. And my doctor would probably smack me for even saying that. But I didn't meet him in my journey until I had already met with and interviewed. Now I'm a pain in the ass. Let's not mince words here. I am a pain in the ass. I knew what I needed and I was going to find it. And I was like, I need to be able to have one surgery. Everybody I'm meeting with is saying you're going to have this surgery and then this surgery and this. I need one surgery because I need to heal once and then be able to take care of these kids, right? But doctors don't want that. They've got their process because multiple surgeries lead to more money, one. And number two, they believe that healing between them is easy. It is not. And anesthesia is not easy. So I was determined to find a doctor that would essentially do demolition and another doctor that would do reconstruction all in one surgery, get it done. And apparently, I was looking for a needle in a haystack. So I started to get frustrated as I went through these interviews with these doctors, and they weren't hearing what was important to me. They were hearing or they were sharing what they wanted to share, not listening to what I was needing. And so I got frustrated, and if I had it to do over again, I would have met with a naturopathic doctor first because that person cares about not only what your goals are, but your whole body and the whole solution, not just a piece of it
Nice.
and not just their piece, right? So they care about the whole you. And once they know what your goals and objectives are, they can guide you. So I met with mine at about doctor interview number 24 before needing to have everything start. And he lost me at hello. He was brilliant and said, "You have to have surgery now, not later. And I'm going to have to make phone calls because, by the way, you're in Arizona in October, and all the snowbirds are taking up all the appointments, and all the people who need elective surgeries have got all the surgery rooms taken. So getting on the calendar is hard, but this is life-threatening for you. And by the way, you have to have this surgeon and this oncologist, and here's why." And I'm like, this is what I needed. So my recommendation to anyone who's just starting this journey, whether you think a naturopathic doctor is needed in your life or not, I can tell you right now, they are the most brilliant strategists you can have. And there aren't very many that are oncologists, naturopathic oncologists, but I just happened to get turned in the direction of one, and they are by far your biggest advocate, and they're going to help you navigate that scary world that you don't know anything about. So I think that would probably be my best piece of advice. And then exercise every single day. Whatever that word exercise means to you, even if it's got a negative connotation, then reframe it and call it movement. I don't care, or call it your happy juice. I don't care what you call it to give it a good stigma and a good sense in your mind. But you have to exercise every day because the release of those positive endorphins will counteract all that cortisol that's getting released from the stress of what you're going through. And that cortisol helps cancer to grow and helps to form more cancers. So you've got to keep that down. And the only way to do that is if you can exercise. Either that or really good drugs. But
Now that's fascinating. I've recently been learning that we do have an inner chemistry, and every time we think a thought, a chemical cocktail with chemicals and hormones, anywhere from 400 to 1400 of them are simultaneously, instantly injected into the bloodstream through the brain and through a bundle of nerves by the heart that's the size of a dog's brain. And
yes,
within two pumps of the heart, the entire body is flooded with these chemicals. So what
yep.
you're saying really makes sense to me. And
Only takes you could counteract that if you can do a reversal of that energy in 60 seconds. So my trick for it is whatever's ailing you, whatever's causing you stress, anxiety, fear, all those dark emotions, as soon as you start to sense that that's happening, turn on music and dance. If you dance for 60 seconds, you just try it. Try and dance and see if you can still have a scornful face. It's almost impossible. And it sounds crazy, but if you could just dance for 60 seconds, you're going to release the counterbalancing mechanisms to keep that from being released. And you're right. If you can keep that out, it improves your mental state, of course. And then on top of that, it's going to improve your physical just through keeping the cortisol out.
I love that. That's a great suggestion. Some people that feel like, oh, well, if I exercise, it'll spread faster and all these things. But really, the chemicals and hormones of stress and fear can be eliminated from the body through a
Right.
suggestion like that. Share with the listeners what you do for physical exercise, regardless of the battle that you've been going through. I got to hear
Oh
this.
man. Well, okay, so there are some days where, especially with the really hard chemo chemicals, that well, I would go for a walk or a run before, very gentle though, because you're going to have so much inflammation that you don't want to add to it. So I would go through a walk or a run before I would go into chemo. But my chemo sessions, when I was going through the hardest stuff, were 8 to 9 hours at a time. The I can't even describe, I'll start gagging, the nausea that occurs after, no matter how many drugs you take. And so for the first few days after the hard chemo, I would just walk. Now, my walk was pathetic, but it was 30 minutes and I would get out and walk only once a day, even. And it would help to flush the toxins, all that chemical that was in me, flush it through my organs faster. So they would say, you're going to start to feel better in 5 to 6 days. So it was like having a bad flu, but I could do it. I got it down to 3 days. And I'll tell you what, to feel better in 3 days versus 5 or 6, I would do anything, right? So I would walk, then I would jog walk, and then I'd eventually work my way back up to a run. Biking was hard until week 3. So the week of chemo, it would be walk, jog, walk, run. The next week, pretty much jog, walk, and run, and then I could finally bike the third week. And so what I did is I calculated when my chemo would be, and then I immediately put in place that I would be able to do biking and running races. And so the first, when I'm talking about the first 2 years that was so brutal, it was all biking and running and snow skiing. And I was not, the doctors hated me because I was not, you're not supposed to be doing all that. They're like, if you crash in the middle of the desert in a 24-hour mountain bike race, you're not near a hospital. This isn't good. I'm like, yeah, whatever. But for my mental attitude, I knew I had to do these milestone races to keep myself going. And everybody rallied around me to help get me there. There was one half marathon I did, and I literally a mile before I couldn't function. I just couldn't get my legs to even go. And so my friends helped get me that last mile. There was a lot of carrying me. So, but it was a lot of running and a lot of biking, some swimming, some skiing, and then now I do so many different things. I do pickleball. I mean, I bike literally every day. You guys, I'm going to say this and you can laugh at me. And Pete, I know, I think I've told you this, but people always say, oh, you need a rest day. You need a rest day. Just exercise a few days a week. That is a bunch of hogwash. You're not a pro athlete. 90% of the audience, I guarantee I'm not talking to pro athletes. I'm talking to regular humans, right? You guys, we rest 23 hours a day. So I got news for you. You can exercise every day and you should. It's important. It's about movement. It's about creating positive energy and momentum. And so I bike every day. And then I supplement in for a second or third exercise each day. There might be pickleball, or it might be, I don't, there's so many things. Walking, taking the dogs for a walk, biking with the kids, but a lot of play. I do a lot of play. And we do a lot of other activities, skiing and snorkeling and scuba diving. So a lot of what I do is all movement related, but I bike every day.
That's amazing. I really needed to hear that. Thank you. As a
You're
reminder,
welcome.
I need to move every day. We all do.
Yeah.
Um, I actually heard that so we've got blood in our body and it's pumped through the heart, throughout the whole vascular system. Well,
Yep.
the lymph system has no pump, and there's 4 times more lymph fluid in the body than there is blood. That's a lot. And the
Right.
only way to get that through the body and flush all the toxins and stay well and boost your immune system, from what I understand, is movement.
That's right. That's right. And I'm at a disadvantage because they took out a whole bunch of my lymph nodes. And so to keep from getting lymphedema and to keep the lymph system moving, it's even more important if you're missing lymph nodes that you move. Yeah.
I want to go back. You had said something about inflammation, and I've been learning a lot about that because I never did get COVID. I don't know why, because the entire household got it 3 times, and I just literally never got it. and it was kind of strange. They say that it might be because of the fact that I was eating eggs every day, and there's some kind of a enzyme in the egg that doesn't allow the proteins to combine or something. I don't know. There's some big old scientific.
Interesting.
Yeah, I was like, huh, okay, I'll just keep eating eggs. That's cool. But inflammation is literally, from what I understand, the cause of every disease. It's inflammation is not good in overabundance for the body. When we get a,
Right.
a sprain or an injury, I know it's good to allow the inflammation to be there, but things like icing, cold plunges, movement, and then Dr. Peter McCullough, I started following him, and he said, well, there's an inflammation protocol that I gave to every one of my patients, especially the ones that were vaccinated, because now they know that the vaccine has in it a program that tells the body we need inflammation everywhere all the time.
Right.
And that can be super dangerous for a lot of us. I know in my past, a quick share, I did get diagnosed back in '99 with bipolar disease, severe depression, anxiety. They stuck me on medications. I was on them for 15 years until 2014 when I got off everything. The inflammation went away. I altered my diet, got my mind back, was able to think again and go forward and start creating a beautiful life. But it was the inflammation that was making my brain swell and push against the fissures and the divots within
Right.
inside the skull that were causing those symptoms.
Yep.
And I had no idea. So Peter McCullough's anti-inflammatory protocol, it's three natural things I bought on Amazon. It was nattokinase, bromelain, and then the turmeric. And I
Yeah.
take that.
Turmeric.
Yeah, turmeric. And
Hmm.
I take that every day. And within 2 weeks, I started to feel better. And within 2 months, it was completely gone. And I was blown away. I was able to go to the gym again without taking a bath with 40 pounds of ice the next day just to function. It was so amazing.
Oh my gosh. Remind me, I didn't know about what was you said the bromine, but there was another one. What was the other
Uh,
thing?
Nattokinase.
Yeah, I haven't actually tried that. I'm going to definitely get on that because I've got to battle inflammation every time after I get chemo.
I read in one of the books that you had actually gone pretty hardcore on the keto diet, which I have also done. And the
Yeah.
inflammation that leaves the body, I mean, it is an amazing. Can you describe to everyone
So
how that went for
keto
you?
was super hard for me. Now, my naturopathic doctor has since done enough research to say, yeah, that probably wasn't the best for your blood type. For your
Mm,
blood type, you need to go the opposite direction and be vegan, which has been amazing. And it was so easy for me. But keto was so hard. But I'll
mhm.
tell you that I think the foggy brain that I got with keto was the hardest part. But it was easy to do because I had a passion, a need. Like I always say this, no one gets off a comfy couch, right? Well, my couch was far from comfy. I was scared shitless. And then so I'm like, I got to do something that can put me back in control. Well, getting on the keto diet was what got me in control. And it just dumped all sugar from my body and took away that inflammation. And here was the coolest piece. I only did keto for 3 months. And it was that waiting period that I had told you about that's so hard, right? They knew that I had a tumor and they said the size. I don't remember what it was now, but let's say it was 4 centimeters or something. They said the size of the tumor, and then when they went to actually take it out, the only change I made was that I went to the keto diet and it shrunk in half. So the doctor came and talked to me after the surgery and said, we took out the tumor and we have questions for you. And I was like, uh, okay. And he just says, what did you do between when we diagnosed you and we originally measured it and when we took it out? And I said, I can't think of anything. And then my husband's like, wait a minute, what about that? You changed your diet. You went to keto. And I go, oh, yeah, yeah, that couldn't have done it. And the doctor said that is exactly what did it. And so it made such an impact and shrank that tumor that I am a huge believer, especially if you need a result really quickly. I did the same. It was the same no sugar, only naturally occurring sugars, like from some fruit, but no sugar on the vegan diet and experienced the same thing. It's amazing how much sugar increases inflammation. And so when you decrease that sugar, it makes such a big impact. My daughter is a little bit of my case study. I don't know if you read about this, but I decided to test this theory. We've got one of our two girls who I would say has a very high propensity towards sugar.
Mm,
She will sneak it. She eats it all the time, and she is very emotional,
mhm,
incredibly emotional, like to a point where you're like you're irrational. Um, and she also wakes up very angry. I
mhm,
don't know how you wake up angry. You just woke up, but she wakes up angry. So when she was about 6 years old, I decided to test this theory, and I did two things. I helped her to rewire her brain. It's called just neuroplasticity. I helped her to rewire her brain by before she would go to bed, I would say, tell me one thing that you are excited about for tomorrow. And she said, well, I'm not excited to go to school. I'm like, well, I'm not excited to go to chemo. But I got news for you, girlfriend. We're both going to go do these things. So let's get back on the what's one thing you're excited about for tomorrow? And she'd say hers, and then I would say mine. And I'd say, okay, so now when you wake up in the morning, remember that one thing. And she would wake up with a smile on her face. And I'm like, oh my gosh, this is awesome. This is working. So we implemented that. And then we also took out sugar. And that, as a parent of a small child, is really hard to do.
mhm.
But all of a sudden, all those emotions and irrational behavior disappeared. So she just is more sensitive to it. And I think I don't know the science behind why she's more sensitive to it than her sister, but she's definitely more sensitive to it. So if we ever see her getting too much sugar, we know we're going to have a doozy of a next day. And so we have to back her back out of it.
Sure.
Because when she doesn't have it, the inflammation is not there for the brain, and she is a very balanced child. So there's a lot to that. I think you hit on something big. There are different components to keto and to being vegan and eating plant-based, but I think the core between the two is that lack of sugar.
Sure. Low carb, low sugar, anything is so
Yep.
useful for the brain. I remember in 2014 when I went off all those medications, um, they had told me to quadruple the recommended dose of amino acids from like GNC or some vitamin shop, and that would really help out with the extremely painful withdrawal effects that I would have of coming down off those medications. Well, I've since then found out that that also helps with sugar. When I'm going on
Oh,
to a keto diet for a 3 month period, I'll actually implement that dosage of those aminos, and I have zero pain, zero grumpiness, zero frustration, and it really helps.
break through that fog probably faster.
Yeah, it's amazing. And also in 2014, I forgot to mention there was a guy that had told me, "Hey, what are you stupid? Look at all the sugar you're eating." And I'm like, so?" And he goes, "Look, just do yourself a favor and go research the show Fed Up. There's a blue and a red M&M. It says F you, and it's Fed Up. And it's basically that it was a documentary all about sugar and how the government has put so much more sugar into everything. And I'm like, well, do they know it's causing all these mental illnesses and inflammation and diseases and cancers? Because the main source of energy for cancer, from what I've researched, is sugar.
That's
So if we
right.
cut it out, the cancer sort of starts to go away, it shrinks, it
Okay.
dies even.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, you're so right. And it's so funny if anyone were to really read labels, you can't find, for instance, bratwurst in the US. It all
Mm,
has sugar. There isn't a single one that doesn't have sugar in it. Where if you're over in Germany, you can get a bratwurst that has no sugar in it. But in the US, they put them in every single one. Or taco seasoning. It's in, I think I've got one that I found recently that didn't have any at all, but it's in literally everything you turn around and look at. Now you can find bacon without sugar, and you can find there are a couple of different meats that you can get without sugar. But I mean, I don't eat bacon anymore. But for my kids and my husband, I go with the no sugar added every chance I can.
Amazing. After watching Fed Up, I started looking at the nutrient information on everything. And if I
Right?
couldn't find it, I would Google it. And I found that you don't look at the sugar, you don't count your sugars, you count the carbohydrates
Yep.
because
Yep.
it's basically the same thing. The sugars, carbs, it all in the body, it causes inflammation. So
Well, and now, I
milk
mean,
even.
there's so many. If you can't pronounce it, you probably shouldn't buy it. If you look at the ingredients and there's something you can't pronounce, like, nope, I want two, three ingredients in anything that I've got. Otherwise, I'm not buying it because it's clearly been processed, and every bit of processed is going to create inflammation. So, yeah, yeah,
I've got a niece, Correa, who is a professional model, and she travels around the world. And my sister Heather would go with her to Europe and Italy. They would go get bread, and they would literally pack an extra suitcase to bring home of this bread because the bread here makes them really inflamed and sick. But over
yeah.
there, they can eat as much as they want. They feel super great. It's the glyphosate over here has really caused some issues in the American diet as well, from what I understand.
Yeah, it's funny. I eat bread, but I honestly only eat the stuff I make. I make sourdough, and it is as pure gets, and the grains are good for me. And it's got nothing added in it. So I've become a huge fan. It's very cathartic. I was overwhelmed and terrified of it at first, but now my kids are a little spoiled because they're like, Mom, this week you didn't make any fresh bread. I'm like, oh, I cut some up and it's frozen. You can pop those in the toaster. But they're like, we're just used to having a fresh loaf on the counter. But honestly, it is as pure and healthy as you can get if you can make your own sourdough bread. And you can get creative with it. But it is not an easy process, and it does take about a day and a half of working it.
Our daughter
But it
Alyssa and our daughter-in-law Amber, they both make us sourdough bread all the time. And I'm like, oh, thank you. It's so good.
so good.
Yeah.
And it's low. So my sister is a celiac, and so she can't have gluten, right? Well, it's so low. It still has gluten, but not enough to actually set off or cause that inflammation that the celiac disease creates. And so she can have sourdough bread when she comes to visit because it's really so low in gluten.
That's
So,
amazing. I love
and
that.
nice.
I'm wondering, we all do, we have an abundance of information, an overabundance of information. We all know what we should be doing, but what's the disconnect? I mean, why aren't more of us uh, doing a healthy lifestyle before we get sick? Why are so many of us waiting until after we're ill to then transition into a healthier lifestyle? What do you think?
People don't change unless they have pain. Pain creates change, and the pain has to be a high enough pain to make it so that if you don't change, you can't face that pain. So, if you think about it, New Year's resolutions, I think you and I might have talked about this. It's coming up on the new year. People are going to make all these New Year's resolutions about what they want to do next year. And only 9% of those who set New Year's resolutions typically achieve it. And the reason why the difference between a 9%er and the 92% out there is truly it comes down to a couple of things. One, it either wasn't a big enough pain to create a need for that change. And every time they turn the corner, the alternative is easier, right? So if it's easier, people are going to do it. And most of the goals that they set, they internalize them, but they don't necessarily set in place the accountability mechanisms to keep it sustainable. And they always do the whole, well, if you could just do it for 30 days, it becomes a habit. That's bullshit. It is not going to become a habit until you don't have to think about it. And the absence of doing whatever it is something that creates pain. Like for me, the absence of going on a bike ride, it's just awful. Like if I don't get to go on one, I feel grumpy and it's painful because I know that I need it so much, right? So it's a little bit of that. It's become so much of a habit that you could do it without even thinking about it. That does not happen in 30 days. That takes a lot longer. And so you have to have some of the social mechanism that creates accountability for most of the things that are change needed. So I'll give you an example. Even though I knew I needed to go plant-based, my doctors all told me this stage 4 situation, you're going to have a ton of side effects that you're going to hate. But if you can go plant-based, you're going to be able to hopefully keep the cancer from growing. Number two, you're going to be able to combat all these awful side effects of all these different medications. Okay, so that's a pretty good pain threshold or need. But at the same time, the idea of doing it was so overwhelming. I didn't know how to start.
Mm.
And I didn't know how to stay that way when every time I travel, I'm going to be faced with having to find unique things to eat. Or if I go to a dinner party, what am I going to do? So it was a little overwhelming. And it wasn't until I had a friend sit down with me and draw out on a napkin and say, here's what I eat for breakfast. Here's what I eat for snacks. Here's how I make and prepare meals for dinners and lunches. Go buy these things. And then I'm going to ask you each day how that's going and what modifications and changes you need. And so it wasn't until I had a coach or a buddy or a group of people who all rallied around me to carry me through that and create the sustainable piece that made it so that it was more palatable. And that goes for everything. Exercise, do it with others, have accountability built in by if you don't show up, people notice you're missing, right? So it's got to be one of those things that creates that change. But people don't they're not going to tackle change that hasn't created pain for them already. So if they're healthy, they're like, I don't have anything going wrong. I'm going to keep this going. I don't care
Yeah.
that I eat bacon every time I turn around or grab a bag of Skittles, right? Or eat ice cream every day. They don't have enough pain to create a change. They know it, they get it, they hear it, they hear the words, but they're like, I can do that for another 10 years and then I'll cut it out.
What would you recommend for those who really don't have a community or people that are rallying around them? Um, how would you
Yeah.
build something like that for yourself? I mean, why is it so hard to ask for help, right?
Oh, we are not wired to want help, at least not the majority of us, right? We want to rely on ourselves. And also saying something out loud or saying, I really care about this goal, help me to achieve it, is embarrassing. It's also terrifying because what if you fail? So there's a lot of fear base in there, but I think also if you're just an introvert who doesn't tend, or you're wired to not want to rely on other people, use technology. There's another, so some people are like, oh no, I can do a built-in accountability system. Well, okay, maybe. But could you do it if you tracked it? So, for instance, my husband's not about to say, hey, help keep me on track. That's not how he's wired. But what he does is he uses apps to help keep him on track. So, Strava is one where it helps you to be able to gauge how many days you've exercised and are you getting faster or slower than in the past. And others can see what you're doing. That's a big one too. Um, so you can use technology to help kind of create an accountability system if you're the kind of person that can be able to sustain that just internally, you don't need the external validation to do it. It could help you to stay on track to achieve it.
That's a really good recommendation. I like that a lot. I noticed in the past when I am tracking my progress, and it really helps me think about it throughout the day because at the end of the day, I know I'm going to input that information, and
Right.
then I want to try to remain the type of person that will cultivate and create more and more consistency because that leads to confidence in myself and self-appreciation.
Right. Oh, okay. I'm going to share something goofy, silly, and wonderful that a 10-year-old taught me. Okay. So, one of my daughters, I don't know if there are other parents out there who do this, but one of them was like, hey, could you approve this app on my phone? And I am terrible. I don't slow down enough to see what these apps are. So, I'm like, yeah, sure, whatever. Approve, approve, approve. And the one, she was on her phone. I said, hey, you know better than that. Put your phone down. We're heading to school. No technology in the morning. And she said, but mom, I just need to put in my positive mental attitude for today, and I need to enter in what it is that I'm grateful for from yesterday. And I'm like, wait, what? What the heck is that app? So it's called Finch, Finch. It is the cutest, most awesome app. I'm using it as a grown-up. It's free. But this app that she taught me tracks and you choose what you want to be challenged with. Okay. So it might be exercise, it might be you're challenged with getting out of bed. That could be your challenge. Drinking water, eating better, creating friendships and nurturing your relationships. This app, although created for children to help give them the right positive mental mindset for every day habits that are formed, is so great for kids or adults. Now, it is a little silly. You get this bird, and then you get to dress your bird based off of things that there's a little bit of silliness to it. But I can honestly say, it's helped me to wake up and to remember the important things of the day that I tend to rush through. And so the slowing down, the listening to nature sounds, the taking deep breaths, and the breathing exercises that can nurture your body, all of that's incorporated in here. And you can take or leave it. You get to pick and choose what you're working on. But that app is a great accountability app for those that don't want to ask for the help, but that could use it, if you can just use that every day to help kind of keep you accountable.
Nice. I'm definitely going to check that out. Thank you for sharing that. That's awesome.
You're welcome.
Uh, the most important thing, I think, for me in my recovery process, coming back from a mental illness and the identity of someone who was mentally ill and all that, and then starting to create and cultivate a life of joy and wholeness and wealth and health, was absolutely having attitude of appreciation and gratitude and rewiring the brain first thing in the morning. As soon as I wake up, daily now for years, I think about every single thing I have to be grateful for, and it's
Yeah.
rewired everything, chemistry, everything. It's amazing.
You inspired me the second that I met you.
Oh,
But what
thanks.
you've gone through and how far you've come, I just want more people to be able to go through that because the mind is so much, you have to treat it just as much as you do your physical body and keeping your physical in shape. The mind piece, keeping it in shape and treating it just as much as you do your body and strengthening it and rewiring it is so important. And there's a gentleman I met, he's an author. His name's Dr. Jason Selk, S-E-L-K. He wrote a book called Relentless Solution Focus. And he talks in that book about when you wake up, you're predispositioned. We all are as humans, predispositioned to think about all the obstacles we could face in the day. And what could kill us essentially is how that started, right? Centuries ago. But now you're still wired that same way to think about all the problems that could exist. Instead, you've got to retrain your brain to think about, instead of problems, all the solutions and the gratitude and positivity. And so you can become a joyful person, even if you're not a morning person. I'm grateful I'm a morning person, but not everybody is. You can be. But again, you have to go through that, yeah, that rewiring that you did. And it's not easy, is it?
Well, yeah, the chemistry of the body. I mean, we're literally addicted to that. It's not the negative thinking we're addicted to. We're addicted to the feeling nature of the body. And when we think a positive thought and that those new chemicals come into the bloodstream, we're uncomfortable because we don't
Yeah,
know what the hell that is. But if we
that's
can
right.
habituate gratitude first thing every day, it starts the momentum process, and the whole rest of the day, if we can keep at it, man, it will alter the chemistry of our body and our entire lives. I really believe that.
I
Um,
love that.
in closing here, we're probably gonna have to do a part two. I really love what you've shared. I love your books. Um, I
Thank you.
know you've done a bunch of races, Lance Armstrong and so many amazing people out there. You've been a great example of how to create and cultivate a community of support. And you've rallied all these people around you. And y while you've been helped by so many, I think personally, it's your purpose in life here on out to continue on as the ambassador of hope for people who are feeling hopeless, who are going through the beginning stages and the processes of trying to navigate a life with cancer and hopefully one without it soon. And so I really appreciate you and what you've done. And I love your work. I highly recommend everyone buy these books on Amazon, give them to everyone you know and love. And because sooner or later, even if you don't now know of someone who has cancer or you don't have it yourself, it's going to come up sooner or later in life. It's just life.
It sure is. You know what, Pete, you're a sweet, sweet man. I think the ambassador of hope is all of us. It makes you forget about what you're going through and you help others. And I think that was why I had to write those books and share the stories to continue to focus on others, because when you do, you forget all about your pain, at least temporarily.
That's amazing. I love that. I agree 100%.
Yeah.
Is there
Thank you for
anything?
having me.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Is there anything else you'd like to share with everyone before we close this episode?
I just no, the only thing I'm going to say is, what are you going to do that's epic today? I would say, after hearing and listening to this, you need to go do something epic for yourselves, right? So I hope you make your Friday epic, Pete, and have a great weekend and make your holidays epic. But you guys start to measure life instead of in mediocrity and epicness.
Love that. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.